On this very auspicious day of Brahmotsava of Shishidija Guranga Dulnitai Ki Jai! Okay, so before we start to read from Srimad Bhagavatam, sprechen wir in Deutsch oder in Englisch? Englisch? Ja, okay, sehr gut. Again. So, okay, we will start to read from the Transcendental Diary first. 29th of November 2022. We read the Srimad Bhagavatam verse 5, 14, 16. And here in this beautiful Transcendental Diary from His Grace Hari Shauri Prabhu, Srila Prabhupada is currently still in Sri Vrindavana on November 24th, 1976. Srila Prabhupada sat back and smiled. So it is brainwash, he grinned. Devotees began to file in, among them Mr. Saxena, the retired school inspector who had turned up late in the evening on 14th. He has moved into the ashram, and Srila Prabhupada wants to engage him in the school. He suggested to Mr. Saxena that he could teach the boys Sanskrit, along with Prem Yogi, although Mr. Saxena has no formal knowledge in Sanskrit. Prabhupada assured him that it would not be difficult. Anyone who knows Hindi, he knows half Sanskrit. Any Indian language, he knows half Sanskrit already. Half has to be completed, because Indian language is directly from Sanskrit. Prabhupada then turned his attention to the meeting and instructed Akshananda Maharaj to make a list of each person and his particular duty. While he waited for this to be completed, he returned the BTG for a moment, telling us that this issue will help 99% about this controversy, brainwashing. Then, with a small group before him, Prabhupada delved into the issue, or at least tried to. He asked Sarvabhavana, "So, what is the difficulty? The other day you complained some difficulty. So, what is the difficulty?" On this occasion, however, Sarvabhavana proved reticent. In front of Akshayananda and Gopal Krishna, he was reluctant to complain in the same way he had previously. Nothing except my jaundice. Prabhupada probed him again. "So, what is the difficulty in discharging your duty? Now you cannot say, what is that? All of you said there's difficulty." Several times he asked, but could not draw a direct response from either Sarvabhavana or any of the others. It seemed there was no real substance to their complaints. But Prabhupada continued to press. He did not want the matter unresolved. "So, what is the difficulty? What is your difficulty? That I must know." Tentatively, Sarvabhavana touched on the source of their grievance. If some of the boys were to get along with the authorities, Srila Prabhupada nodded. So that I want. You can discuss with authorities here. Our first authority is Akshayananda. So, what is the difficulty you get along with? What is the difficulty you must discuss? Otherwise, how it can be resolved? Personally consulting me, I have had no difficulties so far, Sarvabhavana told him, but there have been other. Prabhupada was a bit frustrated, but his patience held. Turning to the other devotees, he addressed himself to the devotee in charge of the guest house reception. Who had difficulty? You came, so many. What is your difficulty? So, what is your difficulty with the authority? This devotee also had little to say. Simply that some problems were there with some of the hired staff. But on a little further discussion, he agreed that the managers were already working on resolving it. Prabhupada frowned. They had all come previously requesting that Indians be given more say in the management and suggesting that there had been some discrimination against them. But in group discussion with the managers, they could not bring out anything tangible to substantiate their feelings. So, what is the difficulty? I do not find out. You told him and that is already done. And you also said there is no difficulty. So why the other day you all came and there was difficulty? Sarvabhavana finally told him that although he personally did not have any difficulty, he had been approached by others who had worked more closely with Akshayananda Maharaj and thus had been speaking on their behalf. So all Indians are here, Prabhupada noted. Now say, what is the difficulty? Well, some things like changing of our duties, changing of our services, Sarvabhavana told him. That struck a chord with Prabhupada. So why you change constantly? Well, the managers are wanting change, Prabhupada, and the devotees were not satisfied with that change. And they wanted to remain in that particular service. Prabhupada glanced over to Akshayananda. The tendency of Westerners in general and of his managers in particular to change things unnecessarily has been one of his recurrent complaints. And it has been an issue several times here in Vrindavan. Without waiting for Maharaj to respond to Sarvabhavana, Prabhupada, with measured patience, instructed him yet again in one of his basic managerial principles. Change is no rectification. If somebody is not working, he should be trained up. Changing is another. If he is a fool, another fool will come. What will be the good? You see? Change, of course, is sometimes required. But if you constantly change, the man is not trained up. That practice is not good. If somebody is not doing satisfactorily, then he should be trained up that you should do like this. And if you immediately change to another, that is not actually the solution, because all our workers, they are not accustomed to certain types of duty. They are devotee after all. So still we have to do something. So one man requires little training. But whatever capacity he has got, he is posted. So immediate change. That is not very good management. Let him be reformed, and whatever inability he has got, he should be instructed, and he should be... And this, all of a sudden change, simply go on changing, nobody. Rolling stone never gathers moss. A rolling stone policy is not good. Keep the stone in a place and it will gather moss. If you simply roll, it will never gather moss. The man who has committed mistake, he should be reformed. He should be instructed. Sometimes I show your cleaners by myself. Do like this. Change them. Immediate change, that is not good management. And to make him competent in that way, that is management. So this policy should be followed, not that because he has done something not correctly, he should be changed immediately. That will not help. Now discuss this point. Gopakrishna was a bit embarrassed that Prabhupada was drawn into the whole affair. Actually, we can solve it ourselves. I don't know why they came to you in the first place, because our whole business is to relieve you of all the problems. Prabhupada agreed, yes. Nor did Gopal agree with the sentiments expressed by some of his fellow Indian devotees. We should not think that if we are Indians, we can have a special access to you. Prabhupada nodded in approval. What he wants is that his men learn how to manage between themselves nicely, without conflict and on their own initiative. So so go and settle up. Gopal Krishna turned to the other devotees. We can settle it ourselves instead of bringing it to Prabhupada. And both Akshayananda and Mahavira expressed their support that there was not so much that it could not be solved on their own. Nobody wanted to disturb Srila Prabhupada, and he appreciated that. But still, before allowing them to leave, he felt the need to stress the proper mood by which these misunderstandings could be avoided. There was little substance to the complaints, but the feelings manifest had potential. He knows that party spirit is easily aroused when there is a lack of Krishna consciousness. And his comment to the Indian boys previously, that their sentiments of feeling racially discriminated against were not feelings of bhakti, was telling. So he concluded this second meeting by accentuating the positive, giving them all a reminder of the Krishna conscious way of overcoming differences. No, it is Krishna's service. Everyone is offering voluntary service. Not that anybody is paid, and if he cannot, dismiss or train him. If he does not know, train him. But things must be done very nicely by cooperation. That is wanted. Everyone should remember that we are serving Krishna, and everyone should remember the other person is serving Krishna. And because he is serving Krishna, he is not my servant, he is my master. That should be always in view. Therefore we address Prabhu. You are my master. We never address, you are my servant. We are trained up to say Prabhu, such and such Prabhu. Prabhu means master. Nobody should think himself that he is master. He should always think that everyone is his master because he is serving the master. This is our philosophy. So in this way, now you have got good arrangement, and they are all intelligent persons, young persons. Akshayananda agreed with a smile. All good people are here. So kindly settle up and do nice things, Prabhupada told him. That I want to see, that's all. Indicating his GBC, Gopal Krishna Prabhu, he said, he is also present, and that time he was not present, so go and work it out. As they all offered their obeisances, Prabhupada put in a final plea. You should always remember that you are helping me. Without your help I cannot do anything. So you do not be disturbed. Try to help me. That is my request. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So did anything particular stand out to your kind attention that you would like to mention and maybe elaborate upon, or you have some doubts or questions maybe?
Difficult and simple for the simple. He's always asking, what is difficulty? And I think there's also a book called like that.
Yeah.
So he is a simple man, although he is so complex in his dealings and so on, but still he remains so simple. And he's wanting his disciple to be as the same. Mainly it's mental problems or the mind for them, and they should come to be more simple. Everything becomes much more easy by being simple.
And what did Srila Prabhupada say how to do that in the end? How one can reconcile working together with others even if there are difficulties? Yeah, but here he said something very important, a principle.
To serve him.
That we are not the master, we are the servant, and we are the other person is the master, Prabhu, because this person is serving Krishna. We are all voluntarily serving Krishna. And that we should be intent upon pleasing the Guru and Krishna. And that should be the center point of our decision making, not so much my comforts or discomforts or my problems and difficulties and other person's shortcomings or whatever. And Srila Prabhupada also, thank you very much, that was such a nice thing. I also was thinking the same of this book, what is the difficulty? I know from my own life experience how the mind can create so many self-made difficulties and the conditioning that we have also sometimes poses challenges. No? We think it's completely natural because we're not aware of those conditionings, but for the others, they're clearly visible. And that makes sometimes cooperation difficult. But Srila Prabhupada here says how to resolve it. No? And he says also that this consciousness of partiality, like the Indians were thinking that they are not allowed to manage because they're Indians. No? That was their first complaint. And so Srila Prabhupada said, this is not a feeling of bhakti. So it's interesting, no? That he's really emphasizing the people to be trained up, and today's Srimad Bhagavatam class will be also on this point, where we seek shelter and how important is the proper knowledge and guidance and training and discipline. Okay, other thoughts, comments, questions? Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 So today we are hearing from the 5th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Amaram Puranam, the pure Purana. And the 5th canto is entitled The Creative Impetus. Das heißt der Antrieb zum Schöpfen, sozusagen. Chapter 14, The Material World as the Great Forest of Enjoyment. So this is again in prose. Okay, anyway, we can chant it here. There's no particular melody. Kvachit kala vishamita raja kula akshasa parita priyatama dhanasu.
Kvachit kala vishamita raja kula rakshasa parita priyatama dhanasu.
Pamrita kaiva Vigata jiva lakshana aste. Kvachit kala vishamita raja kula akshasa parita priyatama dhanasu.
Kvachit kala vishamita raja kula rakshasa parita priyatama dhanasu.
Pamrita kaiva Vigata jiva lakshana aste.
Kvachit kala vishamita raja kula rakshasa parita priyatama dhanasu.
Kvachit kala vishamita raja kula rakshasa parita priyatama dhanasu. Pramrita kaiva
Vigata jiva lakshana aste.
Vigata jiva lakshana aste.
Chitkala Vishamita Raja Kula Rakshasa Parta Priyatma Dhanasu.
Kvachit kala vishamita raja kula rakshasa parita priyatama dhanasu. Pramrita kaiva Vigata jiva lakshana aste.
Kvachit kala vishamita raja kula rakshasa parita priyatama dhanasu.
Kvachit kala vishamita raja kula rakshasa parita priyatama dhanasu.
Pramrita kaiva
Paritakaiva
Vigatta jiva lakshana aste.
Vigata Jiva Lakshana Aste Kvachit sometimes Kala Vishamita made crooked by time Rajakula the government men Rakshasa by those who are like carnivores human beings Aparita being plundered Priya Tatama most dear Dhana in the form of wealth Asu whose life air Pamritaka dead Iva like Vigata Jiva Lakshana bereft of all signs of life Aste he remains. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Government men are always like carnivorous demons called Rakshasas, man-eaters. Sometimes these government men turn against the conditioned soul and take away all his accumulated wealth. Being bereft of his life's reserved wealth, the conditioned soul loses all enthusiasm. Indeed, it is as though he loses his life. The word Rajakula Rakshasa is very significant. Srimad Bhagavatam was compiled about 5,000 years ago. Yet, government men are referred to as Rakshasas or carnivores, demons. If government men are opposed to a person, that person will be bereft of all his riches, which he has accumulated with great care over a long period of time. Actually, no one wants to pay income taxes. Even government men themselves try to avoid these taxes. But at unfavorable times, income taxes are exacted forcibly and the taxpayers become very morose. Kvachit kala vishamita raja kula rakshasa parita priyatama dhanasu pramritaka iva vigata jiva lakshana aste. Government men are always like carnivores, demons called Rakshasas, man-eaters. Sometimes these government men turn against the conditioned soul and take away all his accumulated wealth. Being bereft of his life's reserved wealth, the conditioned soul loses all enthusiasm. Indeed, it is as though he loses his life. Okay, so to give you a brief outline, I was meditating about or reflecting about taking shelter and its consequences, and also connected to that, as I mentioned already, the need of developing proper discrimination and being trained in the absolute truth. Like Srila Prabhupada also emphasized this need of training, not just to change the people in the management position when they do some mistakes, or other people, not just replacing them, but to actually help them to reform and have a change of heart, change of consciousness. And so this training this training opportunity is awarded by the International Society for Krishna Consciousness on broad scale for everyone who's interested in learning what his real goal in life is. Svatagatim hi Vishnu. So I want to speak a little bit about the differences of priorities and values in this current global, post-modern, actually postmodern society and the Vedic high society. And also I want to again outline the progression of taking shelter in the Bhakti Yoga tradition. And just conclude some few points. Is that okay, or do you have some other desire that needs to be discussed, another difficulty that is challenging your devotional life? You have? You can tell me, then I can maybe build it into the lecture. So does anyone have any questions already to what we have heard, or comments?
True.
This is not only the truth, it's the absolute truth. Veda. Pure Puranam, Amalam Puranam, Srimad Bhagavatam, Mahapuranam. So, okay, then let's start. So, I was thinking, and it's very nice that Srila Prabhupada here speaks about that in the Transcendental Diary. Of course, he does not mention it exactly, but when he was probing, what is the difficulty? Come on, tell me. Previously they had some challenges there in India to manage the temple. And so then when they brought the issue before him, they were too shy to speak up. They were just thinking, no, there's no real substance or whatever, to the complaints. And so they did not tell what is the difficulty. And Srila Prabhupada again and again was like, but what is the difficulty here? Speak up, And then finally somebody started and things came out. And so then Srila Prabhupada finally could make the point that instead of replacing people who are maybe sometimes challenging in their behavior or don't perform their duties properly, and replacing them by other people, that real management means to train them actually, to reform their heart. Actually, they are modes of material nature, because every one of us has a certain body according to our previous activities, different births that we took before, different activities and desires that we developed, and different credits, pious or impious, that we earned along the way. So, but the body basically is just like a machine. Sri Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita that the soul is seated on the material body as on a machine. It's called yantra. So we are not the machine, actually. The body is just actually a covering. It's a facilitation for the soul to raise or to elevate one's consciousness, one's awareness. And so therefore it's a good opportunity. And how can we make the best use of this opportunity? First of all, we need to understand how the machine is operating, right? Unfortunately, there are beautiful books like Bhagavad Gita as it is, translated and pure perfect by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, according to the previous acharyas in the disciplic succession. And so they help us to develop the proper perspective, Krishna's vision, so to say. Ne? What is the difficulty, Srila Prabhupada said. And apparently there was no difficulty from Krishna's perspective, otherwise they could have spoken up, But they were ashamed to speak up because the problem was on a different level, on a material level. Ne? Maybe the mind was disturbed, they felt unfairly treated, or maybe they had some kind of conditioning that they were thinking, oh, I'm less worth than the other person. These are all things like facets of the personality, facets of the machine, that are acting or operating the machine like a program. Nowadays we use very often computers. Computers have programs. And so these programs can be changed. They can be updated, for example. We can download another browser or another driver or whatever, if you need. And so with our consciousness, it functions similar, actually. And until we recognize that there is some dysfunctional program, conditioning, or let's say also lower modes of material nature, the mode of passion and ignorance, how can we learn to act differently than we did? In coaching, which I like very much to do, in assisting the people to reach their full potential, it is important first of all to understand, by acting automatically the same way that I always acted before, how can I expect to get different results? It's not possible, right? So in order to change the results, I have to change my way of trying to get the results, right? Can you follow me? Yeah. Very good. Some feedback. Thank you. So for this, we first of all need to have the knowledge, the proper perspective, Shastra Shakshusha, according to, let's say, Bhagavad Gita, for example, how the modes are operating, how the conditioned soul, which is here now, which we are somehow embodied in this material body with our particular conditioning and mental attitude and desires and everything. And how can we change that? First of all, we require knowledge. And then, after the knowledge, what we need is training or discipline. My Guru Maharaj very often emphasized that disciple comes from discipline. Ne? So in the temple we can learn that. We can have the proper discrimination and endeavor with the appropriate means, ne? To control the mind, to control the senses, and we can have good association. People in this time, globally, very often are misled by different people, different desires. They have themselves different aspirations, different mental concepts, into seeking shelter or taking shelter to keep one's wealth. And actually in the verse itself it is said that when the government men turn against the conditioned soul and take away all his accumulated wealth, being bereft of his life's reserved wealth, the conditioned soul loses all enthusiasm. Indeed, it is as though he loses his life. He loses his desire to live. It's a depression, crisis time for him. Why? Because that in which he was putting his faith, in wealth, for comforts, for security, for maybe a prestigious position or whatever is connected with that. Wealth is just a means. So, a means to happiness. It is not the happiness itself that the people search. So this, first of all, is the first misunderstanding. Why do we do things? Why do we want to get a nice car, a house, or whatever? We want to be happy, isn't it? Or why we want to go and explore the world and become big adventurers. We want to gain knowledge. So the soul's nature is Sat, eternal, Chit, full of knowledge and consciousness, and Ananda, full of increasing happiness, everlasting happiness. That means this perverted reflection in the material mind and material aspirations for sense gratification, they are being disappointed. And Lord Krishna explains this here in Bhagavad Gita. Very nice, in the 2nd chapter, he explains that lust, which basically means is the desire for sense gratification, is in the mode of passion. So we try to enjoy the material body or the material mind or even the intelligence, false ego. We try to seek shelter in these places. And Srila Prabhupada, in one purport of Srimad Bhagavad Gita, he says that the senses, the mind and the intelligence are the sitting places of this lust. Through them, the lust bewilders the real intelligence of the living entity. And it is the eternal enemy, known as lust, that is really actually being the source of all miseries for us. Whenever we have difficulties, intrapersonal with our own mind or whatever, desires, needs, or interpersonal with other people, the source of all these problems, source of all the difficulties, like Srila Prabhupada would say, is that we are taking shelter we're searching for shelter in the wrong place. So when lust, because it is temporary, becomes disappointed, it turns into lust, and then anger arises, frustration, anger, and then when one is angry, maybe you can recall a situation where you had a fight with another person. What happens is the memory gets bewildered, things become unclear, and then the intelligence gets lost, and one falls down back into the material identification. One identifies himself with his conditioning or with whatever situation was the problem. So, actually trying to seek shelter is in wealth or in sense gratification, in a misunderstanding of identifying oneself with the material body, mind, intelligence, or false ego, ultimately only leads to further miseries. And Sri Krishna also explains that a wise man does not take from the sources of miseries, which is sense gratification or lust. And we can see from the progression, mode of passion, and then anger comes, which is a sign of the mode of ignorance. So it's very much degrading, pulling one down. One becomes forgetful and identifies with that which we are actually not, with the material body. Prabhu, du hattest eine Frage? Niklas?
Ich wollte nur anmerken, dass das ja eigentlich nur dadurch entsteht, dass man dann die Erscheinungsweise der Unwissenheit überschwankt, anstatt die Erscheinungsweise der Klugheit zu entwickeln.
Ja, richtig. That's true. And it's the modes of material nature which our body is consisting of that are fighting for predominance. Also when we have some fight with other people, sometimes it's one person is more in ignorance, another person is maybe more in goodness, or and they are having a dispute. But what is really happening there is the modes of material nature are fighting for predominance. It's not so much the persons. Of course, everyone has his own perception and everything. So a good thing to do is to step back, to first of all give room for the other person to express, and then to, for example, to reflect what the person has said, to really connect with the person, and not just the content, like what the words the person says, but also sensing the emotions of the person, to really understand the person, so that every fight can be actually an opportunity for deepening one's trust and the relationship with another person. That is the great potential that we have in an ideal situation. So that then the other person feels fully understood, and then he's also open to listen to the other person that previously he was fighting back to, and then it's like, okay, so because of this and that you see the things others than me, and actually, we want to do the same. We want to serve Krishna, we want to please Srila Prabhupada, but you have a different story than me, or have a different values than me. For you it's more important to be immediately serving, and I want to give maybe high quality service, which can be a little bit delayed. So you see, one can also sort out difficulties in this way, by coming to the mood of goodness. And how to do that? We can study Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Lord Shri Krishna explains the modes of material nature. He also explains in a whole chapter, divine and demonic qualities. And we can understand that this current material civilization that we have is actually based, for example, a lot on identifying with the body. And people want to have comfort, they want to have security. Therefore they seek shelter in the structures that are already there, like the political system, for example, or the money system or something, Because people are a little lazy, then they are not lazy in a spiritual sense, that they are not willing to endeavor to take full responsibility, full ownership over the things that they do, they agree to give away their freedom by adjusting themselves to a particular system. For example, very practical example, when one is taking a loan, let's say one wants to buy a house or a car or something, for whatever reason. Maybe it's the envy on the neighbor that I also want to have a big car, big house or something, or I want to give a nice shelter for my family, so instead of renting a house, renting a flat, I want to have a house with a garden, and you know, maybe I can read that I give it to my children. So we may have different motivations, but then when we take a loan, the problem with loans is that there's some interest, so one has to pay higher money back to the other person, and one is basically losing his freedom. One has to keep the job, maybe one is not very happy in his job, but just to somehow or other get to pay off the rates of the loan. One is stuck in a particular job where maybe one does not like his colleagues, or has problems with his boss, or whatever, you know, does not feel fulfilled. And also, not only is one giving away one's freedom of choice, but one is also spending a lot of his life energy. Because what is happening when we pay off a house, we want to have higher standards of life instead of living a simple life and focusing on self-realization. Then our luxuries can basically also enslave us. We become the servants of the house. There's so much to clean. Maybe in young years you don't mind, you know, because you have so much power, but when the body is 80 years old, then it becomes a burden, you know, or can become a burden, because then it's like a huge house, you're living there, maybe even alone, you know, just because you worked all life for this house and finally it's yours. And then you have a garden that you cannot take care of, and you have a house, and you basically just using a few rooms in the house, you see? And then people are worrying about their wealth and so many things. Can you see the consequences of seeking shelter in these temporary things? We are always worrying. And Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, in the beginning and in the end, give up your anxiety. Don't have any fear. Just do what I tell you and you will be happy. It can be so easy. Life can be so easy. But why people are doing that? That is because they have a wrong understanding of who he is, he or she. And so when we don't have a clear understanding of that this body is actually a machine, which is a vehicle for the soul to gather experiences, to learn especially, and to reform back to proper culture and everything, then one acts based on, let's say, empiricism, what the senses are telling one or what the mind is telling one, rationalism. But we actually do need to develop the proper discrimination, or let's say the good intelligence. We need to reflect, be reflective. Does it actually serve me? And to be the slave of my family, house or boss or something? Or do I want to be rather free and rather choose, for example, which profession I am engaged in, and instead of paying a big loan, maybe I can get some education instead, and then by that learn how to become self-reliant, so to say, self-employed. So the proper discrimination comes by training and by proper guidance. So in our tradition we have the spiritual master, and the mentality for that is that of humility. Without humility, this is really the beginning of all knowledge. Without understanding that I need to know something more than I already have in order to change my life, how can we take on our full responsibility? So first is humility, then taking on resuming one's responsibility, thinking, okay, it was my choice, so now I have to take the consequences. And so we heard here also in the verse of the negative example of the material government, ne? Which is compared to carnivores, rakshasas, man-eaters, which are taking away that which is the most dear to the person. And so we have this example to learn from, because I mean, ultimately, why does the government take away one's possessions? Because they have some self-interest, right? Whatever it may be. Maybe they want to just expand their influence, and therefore they need all the money they can get for warfare. So, for example, to take over another country or something. So, but that means they put their own self-interest above the interest of another person. And so this is natural in one way, that because everyone thinks of its own well-being first. Like, for example, when the house is on fire, first of all, we want to be safe, or our children or something, and then maybe we can take care of the neighbor's children or whatever, help another person out of the house. So, but the problem is being misguided by our senses, mind, intelligence, or material leaders. Then the problem is that there's a competition. Everyone is fighting for exploiting others and for ruling over them. So this is also another consequence of being misguided. Also, we can see that in the postmodern time, global time in which we are living now, I don't know the proper term, but we can see that people, they focus only on wealth. Money, 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 sweeter than honey, isn't it? But in the Vedic culture, people understand artha, or money, is important for sense gratification, but how to get it. Dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Did you ever hear of this before? Dharma means one acts piously, like when we give a donation. It is understood that this money that we spend, it will come back, let's say 10 times more or something in the next life to us. We can understand we're doing others good, but we will receive more good. So Dharma. Then artha. Artha means, okay, we work, and we work for what we want to enjoy in the material world. We want to maintain a family or whatever duties we have. And then with that artha, with that wealth, we can get karma, sense gratification. But then being frustrated from the sense gratification and starting to recognize its flickering, temporary nature, and also the quality of suffering within it, then at one point the jiva becomes so disappointed and he just wants to get out of this material world. Many people nowadays, they're interested in Buddhism. Why? Maybe they have enough from being a person, having been disappointed in relationships so often already. Because this is dysfunctional. This material society is based on values that are not practical. And in the Vedic culture, it goes even further. It's not only Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, but the fifth wealth, one's own wealth, is actually Svarta Gatim Hi Vishnu, Shri Vishnu. To understand that I am actually a fragment of Lord Vishnu, a part and particle. And that therefore, my real self-interest lies not only to get out of the material world, but to actually get the position of serving God with love and devotion. That's much higher than moksha. So, okay, do you have questions until now? Or comments?
Krishna says, I'm just paraphrasing, but he actually states that someone who's very dear to him, he will take all his possessions. And so now, like, there's these demon-like businessmen who are taking possessions. Like, I find it funny, it's the same. The thing happening. But one time it's like, obviously Krishna who's like stating it, and here is like the blood-seeking, sucking businessman, so to speak.
Yeah, very nice point. So, but the difference is the motivation. Why is Krishna taking away everything a person possesses of a devotee who is very dear to him? That is to make him detached from this place of suffering, from this imprisonment in this material world. To really disillusion him or her, and let him or her experience the temporariness of this life and everything that's connected to that. So we need a deep impression, to burn the finger. If a child burns his finger in the fire, he will never again come close to the fire because he knows this is not nice. It burns like anything, and you get this blasen and everything. It can take a long time, and it's hot. It's very not nice pain actually if you burn yourself. So ein Kind, das sich verbrannt hat, das scheut das Feuer, sagen wir in Deutschland. A kid which experienced the burning will stay away from the fire. But the demon, the carnivorous rakshasas of government officers, so to say, as given the example here in Srimad Bhagavatam, they are interested in exploiting the people for their own goals. Not for the highest welfare, but only for their welfare. We can see that in so many wars, in Iraq war, trying to overtake the Middle East in order to get the oil fields and everything, because of the automobile industry, they need oil and everything actually, So there are big lobbies behind the things, big companies, big people who have their own interests on top of others. They say, no, my interest has to be served first. I don't care whether you die or not, And we can see that also in the last 3 years of the sea crisis, epidemic, so it's pandemic, so to say. That the government also, they just enforced laws that they liked, They kept people imprisoned in their own flats, and even children had to wear these masks, And so very cruel, actually, torture, If you think about it more closely, for the children, when they're young, they need to learn how to speak and how to feel, and they learn it by mimicking, by watching, So if you have this half face covered, how can they learn these things? It's disturbing their social interactions, maybe for whole life. And old people, they were even forbidden to be visited in the old age homes and everything, and made so crazy by fear only, So we can see how this is being also done practically in recent times, And let's see what else is going to come, what other things the governments have in petto, world governments. But the principle is the same, The principle is, my interest is more important than your interest. Therefore, you have to do what I tell. Whether it is enslavement by loans or by government enforcement or whatever, it's not really important. So, and how to get out of it is by first of all developing the proper knowledge. Because we are understanding, we are standing under the laws of material nature. We are standing under the laws of the government. So we have to act accordingly. And how to get out of the modes of nature? Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, only someone who is devoted to him, 10%, he can overcome the modes very easily, the conditioning that one has. It's by the mercy of devotional service. Devotional service is a rare opportunity, especially pure devotional service. Srila Prabhupada very often he also said, familiarity breeds contempt. Also Vertrautheit schafft Verachtung in Deutsch. That means when we are used to certain things, we take things for granted. whether it's people or situations or whatever, and then we can become negligent. No? We start to care less, and we just think, oh, I will always have that, and we don't care for it. Like water, for example. Recently I was reflecting about that, how much I was abusing and wasting water in my childhood and youth, And now, since I became older, and I learned more about the potency of water, and it's so valuable. For example, this is the most important, most valuable element, agyam, when we offer puja, the water in the conch shell. In previous times could also time travel with water, because you can charge the water by mantras, by sound vibration, So it's a sign of sounds, of frequency basically. And also we can find this in the Mahabharata, where they have mantra weapons. Arjuna and the Pandavas in the Battle of Kurukshetra, they could create everything they wanted, whirlwind weapons and whatever, even Brahmastra. How? By touching water and chanting a mantra and loading this arrow, so to say, with this vibration. So water is such an important element. 70% or between 60-70% of the body consists of water. And the quality of water also impacts our consciousness. Are we aware of that? Or do we still drink the tap water, which has gone through the bodies of so many millions of people, maybe 10 times, 100 times, full of medicines and hormones and everything, peed out and then again filtered and retaken? Congratulations, no problem why we have these mental problems nowadays, because we are not aware of that. But then, as we grow up and we pay more attention to the details, then we can again take back this appreciation for people. We don't take things for granted anymore. Like when I now got the opportunity to be here in the Köln Temple again, for me this is like a second life that I get, second chance. After having messed up the first time, basically, by not attentive enough chanting and neglecting the association of devotees, because there were some challenges also and some conditioning, I almost lost devotion and service, So this is so important, especially in the nectar of devotion. We hear that pure devotion and service, one of its characteristics is that it's rarely achieved. And we heard recently in the Nectar of Devotion that Krishna, he can grant mukti, liberation, very easily. Different types of liberation. There's no problem for him. But to grant his loving devotion and service, that is rarely achieved, actually, because this is under the guidance of Srimati Radharani. By rendering loving devotion and service, one can actually catch Krishna, like Mata Yashoda when she was binding Krishna to the mortar in the Damodar Lila. How was she able to bind the Supreme Unbound? It's not possible to bind God, but by her affection, by her love, by her well-wishing, so to say. Okay, so just to explain again this progression of Bhakti Yoga tradition, how to take proper shelter, because now we discussed how to not to take shelter and the consequences it has, that we lose our freedom and also discrimination and other things. So the process of taking shelter, according to our Bhakti Yoga tradition, is that first of all we start with hearing. But what does it mean? Okay, we want to hear. It requires open-mindedness. We need to be on search for the truth. It's not that it ultimately falls upon our head and then suddenly we become enlightened. No, we must have an effort, right? We need to be open and look for it. And then the next step is relationships, sadhu sangha. We feel inspired by other people's examples and their practices, and then we start to develop relationships with them, maybe the people they care for our well-being, and then trust develops, faith. And as a result of that, we become engaged also to serve, to learn to serve, and to discipline ourselves. And by this process of loving devotion and service and discipline, our mind becomes disciplined, our spiritual intelligence becomes strengthened. And so when this happens, And we learn to act according to Krishna's perspective, Shastra Chakshusha. We know what is right and what is wrong, because we study books like Bhagavad Gita, for example, and Srimad Bhagavatam. Then the faith also can become stronger, because suddenly we understand the challenges that we are facing is all about clearing our own misgivings, our own anatas. And then once we do that, we can feel taste developing and steadiness, and then ultimately also attraction and love for the Supreme Absolute Truth. And what is related to that, God realization and self-realization go hand in hand. So when we realize the Supreme Lord and that we are part and particle of Him, our own nature shines through and begins to manifest more and more. So that means we become very fulfilled, and we can actually contribute our share to the upliftment of the world. Okay, so basically I already mentioned to you, my main impetus point is beware of negligence, taking things for granted. And another point is that the material problems can only be solved by spiritual solutions. And one needs to make the endeavor himself. The choice is ours, whether we want to look for spiritual enlightenment or not, to have an alternative perspective in our lives, and to learn to distinguish the right from the wrong. Otherwise we can just get a reflection of happiness, sense gratification, and we become entangled in miseries and in samsara cycle, in birth and death, repeatedly. Thank you very much. I want to end here. And it was maybe a little bit lengthy, but do you have some comments or questions?
I like that you prepare the lecture. You have like a red thread that you follow through. That's nice to have like a clear line to follow.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Nice feedback. Oh, good.
Need of change heart
Yeah.
every day.
Yeah.
Change heart.
Not only every day, every moment.
Every moment. So the Father said the word is the number one of Krishna.
Yeah.
And number one of me.
Devotees are the most important. Devotees are the ones who keep us chanting Hare Krishna. Without association of devotees, trust me, it's not possible. It's very hard.
Service number one, word is number one, and also number one.
Everything number one in Krishna consciousness. Würdest du noch was sagen, David?
Nee. Ehrlich gesagt fällt es mir doch leichter in Deutsch,
Ja, ne?
als zu sagen. Ich werde immer etwas müde.
Okay. Ist aber auch eine Frage von Training.
Wahrscheinlich.
Und es geht ja nicht darum, dass man, it's not necessarily that which is more comfortable for us, which is of higher benefit. So we have to be aware of that too. The mind, the brain is built in such a way that in order to save energy, because it consumes, 60% of the energy that we, produce with our Stoffwechsel and everything. So then, in order to be energy efficient using, it has habits, And so we can be also entrapped in mechanical chanting, for example, And we think, no, I'm chanting very focused, but if it's just like repeating, and we are not actually also considering our relationship to Shri Radha Krishna, and chanting, that can be a big stumbling block also in devotional service. If we allow the mind to take the lead, because it feels more comfortable, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Ram, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. Or because the mind feels good. Oh, Krishna's name is so sweet, and then one falls in the trap of enjoying the sweet names and then one loses again the taste, because it's not about my enjoyment, it's about pleasing Krishna. It's the service to chant. Beware.
Yeah, but I don't know, but I think you have to draw a balance, right? Because the brain mechanism. That's why we also repeat stuff, I feel. That's why we have the same prayer every time, so it gets imbued on us, you know, so it gets like really inside of us. And yeah, so yes, and sometimes, I mean, you have to find a balance, because if you always do the uncomfortable way, then you get thrown off, and you know, yeah. So that's just my point where I'm standing at. To choose like where it's really healthy to go uncomfortable, the uncomfortable way, you know, where it really has a sense, and sometimes it's just meaningless, or it's just unnecessary, or it's just a little. You wouldn't get so much if you. So
what helps you to choose then? What helps you to develop your discrimination power?
Well, it's just experiencing, it's just doing and trying your best, and yeah, really, yeah, trying to give and to do, and then there's a point where you're like, okay, now you've done enough. Okay, then you can maybe do a little more and a little more, but then maybe, yeah, I don't know. Like for example, nowadays when I'm really tired, I take a warm shower and I take a little cold shower at the end, you know. But when I started here, I only did a cold shower, and then my body was cold, and yeah, and it was just not good for the whole day, you know, not efficient. So yeah.
But if we only trust our mind and senses, no?
Yeah.
Our experiences, like you said,
Mm.
then we lack Krishna's perspective very easily, because that's again our reference point. You know?
I know.
That's what feels good, or what we have already experiences of. I'm not dismissing these things, they are applicable in the material realm. But in Krishna consciousness, we need to also have guidance from the Shastra. Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. And this is the main source. And everything else is secondary, our experiences. And then we can be safe. That's the difference to material consciousness. We have to be aware of our consciousness, not to drag us away, because Maya is very potent. Ne? Very, very potent. She's compared to a witch, you know, which can bewitch one, you know, and then you feel like, oh, nice, yeah, that's completely Krishna conscious, but it's actually not, because we don't read the books, for example, and then we just follow our mind because it feels nice or whatever feels natural for the conditioning of our body, and we are kind of dragged away, you know, but it's, you know, and then we die, maybe, you know. Like I was dragged away from the devotee association, you know, because I felt too much offended or whatever, you know, in the past. So this is taking the difficulty when we take shelter in the mind, you know, in past experiences or in sense perception, they're limited. We need this additional transcendental knowledge as a third source of reference. We need to check our reference points. Jai! Grantadrat Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Gonitai ki jai.
Genau, 1 Stunde und 8. 1:08.
Oh, super. Das ist ein gutes Zeichen.